The following program is an original production of WYCC PBS Chicago. Closed captioning for the professors is provided in part by the Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury and wrongful death law firm in Chicago.
After years of wrangling over the issue in Washington, it appears as if an immigration reform plan is finally taking shape. What are the long-term implications for higher education and, more specifically, undocumented immigrants who are currently enrolled or seeking higher education? That's the focus of our discussion today on The Professors. Joining us today to talk about immigration reform and its impact on education are Carolyn Schoenberger, attorney and professor at Harold Washington College; Akbar Dima, professor of political science at Chicago State University; Dr. Jaime Dominguez, professor of political science at Northwestern University; and Rashid Carter, business professor at Harold Washington College. Welcome all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, immigration reform. It is a slippery slope conversation because there are so many angles, and I think there's so much misinformation. Even when I was doing my research, for the sake of this conversation, I am going to really lean on Carolyn to serve as our subject expert, because Carolyn, you also work with the legal clinic.
The Chicago Legal Clinic has an immigration program, and that's what I...
Okay. If I came to you and I said, tell me 5 things a student needs to know about the current immigration, what is it called? The proposed Immigration Innovation Act of 2013. What are 5 things we need to know?
Well, I would need to know a lot about the students. I would want to know if there had been applications filed for them in the past. I would want to know if they had any kind of criminal history. I would want to know more about their parents and their family. I would want to know about basically their whole life here.
Now tell me about, now when I was doing my research, I learned about DACA. DACA stands for what, Jaime?
Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals.
Now, when we started the show, I had read several sources that said DACA was a law that was signed into effect August 2012, and you guys vehemently said, no.
It's not a law.
Okay, tell us, what is it?
It's more of a presidential initiative to give a temporary reprieve for those individuals who are undocumented, are seeking to stay, and most of them are seeking to work. So it gives them the ability to obtain a work authorization. What we need to understand, though, it was a 2-year program, but it doesn't have any teeth. And when I say that, I mean it can be suspended tomorrow. So there's nothing to say that this can disappear. So there's more than, I believe, 800,000 individuals who actually will benefit from this program should they actually take the steps to pursue that. But again, this is some of the criticisms about DACA is that it's not on solid footing, right? And until we have an actual federal law passed by Congress, then that becomes law, and states have to adhere to that. As of right now, it's really more of a kind of helter-skelter.
You can't even appeal if you are denied benefits. If you apply for DACA and you're denied, there's some kind of internal appeal, but you can't seek review from the Board of Immigration Appeals or the courts, and they can change the rules tomorrow.
Now, DACA specifically targets students, correct?
No.
Well,
no.
The age.
No.
No, it doesn't.
No, just for youth, but
It's
these
for
are
youth.
for
Youth arrivals.
Youth arrivals,
yeah,
okay.
who came to the United States by no choice of their own. You have to be, if you came under the age of 16.
And it comes with a fee.
It comes with a fee.
$465, yes.
Well, they're all going to come with a fee, right? Even this new proposed
Everything is a
immigration is
fee.
going to have a fee. So.
Everything is
Who
a fee.
gets the money? Where does that money go?
Government.
Government gets it.
And
government
they
goes to
allege
the
it's to
federal
cover their
government.
costs, but I've seen fees rise exponentially just in the last 10 years. But going back to DACA, you cannot be 31, so
Right.
up until the age of 31, you either have to have a high school diploma or a GED or be enrolled in a program, and then if you go to renew in 2 years, you have to show that you actually completed the program. You cannot have committed a misdemeanor, which is considered significant, such as a DUI, and there are others that we counsel people you don't want to do this because it'll get you into trouble. You have the document that you were here on June 15th, 2007, and that you have continuously been in the United States since then. Essentially, though, you're turning yourself into immigration. And if you have something that is really nothing and you got supervision for a DUI and it's really nothing, and under state law that would not be a conviction.
But
that
under
is a
this
significant misdemeanor considered a conviction under immigration, and you're putting yourself and your family in jeopardy.
But if you meet those requirements, I think one of the wonderful things about DACA is that it does provide an opportunity for college students in particular to work and to gain employment opportunities so they can finance their education.
Absolutely.
Because obviously they wouldn't otherwise be able to apply for grants. And
Well,
various
let's talk about the
loans.
finance education because
Well,
only
they can't get federal.
they cannot apply for FAFSA, but there are 13 states, of which Illinois is one of them, that will allow the immigrants in order to pay in-state tuition costs, right?
Correct.
And but they don't. Would they qualify for Pell?
No, they cannot qualify for
So
any
they don't
kind of
qualify for nothing.
zero.
No.
But what they are doing, for example, in this state and others, is that they're basically creating a private fund, essentially, by businesses where they can actually.
But is there much in that
fund.
private fund?
Well, hopefully after the gala that's going to take place fairly soon, there'll be more. There is a organization, I believe it's the dreamgala.org or something, where people who really want students and to be able to finance their education can go and make donations or buy tickets. I do want to point out that one of the wonderful things about the city colleges of Chicago is the fact that everyone is welcomed and that it is affordable education, that you have very dedicated people who are there to teach, and it's a way that people can realize the American dream, which is why people come here. It's because they believe in the American dream, and city colleges, Harold Washington College, is a way that people can realize the dream.
Well, let's talk about
and that is one of the programs that they are going to implement at the federal level, the DREAM Act, which has not been passed, but when passed, it will achieve some similar objectives as the one that we proposed.
Okay, well, help me understand. Then how is the proposed DREAM Act, which is sponsored by our Illinois, Dick Durbin, as well as Orrin Hatch from Utah, different than this Immigration Innovation Act of 2013, besides a whole bipartisan thumbprint? How do they differ? Well, especially when it comes into terms of our students. How does it differ?
Well, the DREAM Act, I think, speaks specifically, I mean, a core component is education and the opportunity. I mean, that, I think, is the difference here. And I think the reason why it's significant to do it at the federal level is because, again, that as it stands right now, each state is pretty much initiating its own program, so there's no uniformity, there's no consistency. What such a piece of legislation would do at the federal level is just, it'll basically standardize that whole process, right? And so, and if students meet a certain profile, certain criteria, they will actually qualify for those opportunities. As it stands right now, that's not available.
Am I saying this incorrectly to say, okay, if I am a student, I need to keep an eye on the progress of the proposed DREAM Act. But if I'm looking for a job, I need to keep an eye on this Immigration Innovation Act? Is that a fair assumption?
Well, where the DREAM Act targets minors, it actually stands for Development, Relief, Education of the Alien Minors. So what happens is, if you came here as a minor with your parents and you remained here, you came here not on your volition, you came here because you had parents who were undocumented, and you went to school and you got high school education, and you are of a good moral character, and you enrolled in the military, and you do all of these things, and you have lived continuously in the United States 5 years prior to the enactment of the DREAM Act, then you qualify to be put on the path of citizenship. First, you are given 6 years of work authorization. After 6 years, then you are given a green card, from where you proceed to become a citizen.
12 years?
Did
I hear that? Is that 12 years then? Is that
no, 6 years. 6 years as work authorization. After 6 years of work authorization, then you get additional years to be on a green card, permanent residency, that is to say. And then from there, you pay fees and then become a citizen.
A long process.
It is
That is a long
process.
process.
Yeah. But the idea of Dick Durbin, Senator Durbin, is to make sure that you don't jump ahead of the queue. You have to line up as immigrants seeking legal immigration.
One of the misconceptions out there among Americans is that you think that if because you marry an American citizen, you become one. And that actually is not the case. That it's a long process and may include spending up to 10 years in the country of birth or in another country. So there are a lot of misconceptions among Americans, including the misperception that people who would benefit from the DREAM Act would jump the waiting list of people who have been trying to follow the rules.
Yeah, if you get married to an American citizen, this is an aside, and you are in the country, the path to citizenship and green card holding is much faster than if you are living abroad and you are married to an American citizen. There are other nuances. If you are in the military and you marry an American citizen, or you are married to an American citizen who is in the military, you have a faster route toward a green card and citizenship than.
If you're in America, if you are fighting during a declared war like Afghanistan or Iraq and you're undocumented, you don't become a permanent resident. You have to meet the qualifications, become a citizen, and frequently we will see posthumous citizenship ceremonies.
Is it wrong for me to say, doesn't it seem kind of hypocritical to allow an undocumented immigrant to enlist in the military, but then not want to give them a pathway to citizenship?
Well, there is a pathway.
A quicker pathway to citizenship,
and accelerated. That was my main point.
It doesn't even, but the way you describe it, it doesn't even sound accelerated.
Well, no, because
what's so
normally
protracted, but
you would have to normally become a lawful permanent resident, and then depending on whether you're married to a United States citizen and have lived with a United States citizen for 3 years, or if you became a permanent resident through other means, it eliminates that.
Yeah.
I just find this whole thing just very frustrating.
But 3 years if you are married to an American citizen who is in the military,
I get all that, but for some
not.
reason, fundamentally, quoting MC Light, I just cram to understand. Help me understand, Rashid, why I'm supposed to be inspired. I'm supposed to say this sounds like a great idea. This sounds like a wonderful opportunity for our undocumented immigrants who are currently students or who want to be students, but for some reason there's a thread of vex that I'm reading throughout all of these statements. What am I missing?
It's an evolutionary process, and I think what Carolyn is saying is that compared to where we've been, this is definitely progress, right? And so the
okay, then help me understand, where have we been?
Okay.
How is this different?
Well, right now, if you entered the country through a border and you don't have a visa and you marry a U.S. citizen, you can apply and be in this country for a visa, but you cannot get the visa without leaving the country and then presenting what's called, I'm making this very simple,
but what if they want to be a student? How does that, tell me the complexities. Okay, I get that part, but then if they want to be a student, then what?
City colleges welcomes everyone, so that is not an issue.
It's not an issue.
What an issue is getting the money to pay, because undocumented students are not eligible for federal programs for economic aid. And even though that's being addressed at some state levels, and that's something our wonderful state is doing, but that remains to be a problem.
Okay, so this can, go ahead.
Is it not the case that if someone came to the city colleges, they show up, they complete an application, they say, I want to be a student. In that application, you are asked whether you are a foreign student or you are Illinois resident. You give that information, and if you give it correctly, that I am just arriving from Ecuador, I like it here, I want to be here. Is it not the case that the foreign admissions office will ask such a person to present their documents?
I would tend to doubt that.
No, because it's my understanding, in order for, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rashid, because you worked on reinvention, we have an open enrollment, right? So all you need to do is bring what? Photo ID and proof of address.
That's right.
That's it.
Okay.
Which is perhaps where Quinn and his initiative of having undocumented immigrants being allowed to get a driver's license probably comes into Curry's great favor for when it comes to undocumented immigrants wanting to come into City College of Chicago. But that's not the same requirement when it comes to the adult ed program, correct?
Right. You can
because there's a very vibrant ESL component that comes with City Colleges of Chicago too. So a lot of the undocumented immigrants who are coming to CCC, they're not enrolling as typically as first-year students. They're going through the ESL program.
That's correct, and that's one of the reinvention goals, right? Is to bolster that program. We get a lot of our students, our new enrollees, who enroll in that program as we're articulating, and so we get those enrollees. But the upshot is that if a further inquiry is made for any reason, right? If subsequent questions to the matriculation process can be asked. And at that point, you know, a student could be mandated to give proper documentation to prove that they are citizens.
I have many students in my classes over the years who are undocumented, and I don't ask them. They know I do immigration work for the Chicago Legal Clinic, and they come to the clinic that we run at Harold Washington College. We've reviewed a lot of DACA applications. And so there are a lot of students who feel comfortable and are there learning, and frankly, they're inspirations for the
at most
professors.
four-year colleges in this country, you complete an admissions application form. You must state your status as a student, whether you are an international student and on visa. If you don't have F1 visa and I-94, you will not be allowed to enroll. So it is possible that while we may have many undocumented students at city colleges and other community colleges, it is possible that you would not have many of those going through the four-year colleges, except they grew up here, they are as native as apple pie, then they can proceed without being dictated through their status.
But CCC has a very strong forward transfer program as well too, so I can see where then that bridge would definitely come into play. Yes.
I have students who are undocumented or I had students. They're now at other four-year institutions, which and including some very. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to follow up on this issue because I want this to continue. I don't want it to be controversial, but very prestigious institutions have taken my students who are undocumented. And I'm really proud of those students, and I'm proud of those institutions for doing that.
Yeah, well, you don't need to be a citizen.
The point I was making is if they grew up here, it is very difficult to tell their status because they have been acculturated, they went to high school here, but they are still undocumented. Right, that is a separate category of undocumented students. Yeah. The ones I pointed was a person coming from Ecuador, for instance, arriving here and wanting to stay, would not be acculturated the same way as the person who grew up on Chicago streets. That was my point.
But even some of those students you see coming out, particularly I'm from California, but like the Cal State system out there, even the UC system where I went, you don't need to be a citizen to attend those. The problem is where it is actually being able to pay.
Exactly.
So that's what it basically is. But you can be undocumented. If you can pay the fees at a Cal State University or University of Illinois, they're not going to turn you away.
So, and then,
unless
like
you
I
live
said,
in South
and that's
Carolina
where
where they have
the
these
Innovation Act comes into play.
aggressive
that allows them
measures
to work.
that don't allow you, regardless of whether you can pay or not.
But then the question becomes, okay, so.
And that's where I think the point that Rashid made about under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, I guess we call it Programa de las Jóvenes.
Yeah, for young people.
That's where it would be beneficial to be able to legally hold a job, wages would be higher, and to be able to pay for an education and apply also for various non-federal programs.
Well, now I am concerned about the wage issue, so I'm going to turn to Rashid, because when I was reading over this Immigration Innovation Act, this proposed act, it has a lot of influence from this group called the Inspire team. And it's consistent of the likes of Microsoft, the National Science Teachers Association and Caterpillar. And so this is where the corporate piece comes in and talks about being able to afford them jobs and things of that nature. But there's nothing in this act that talks about fair wage and protection of them as employees, these students as employees. So that kind of concerns me, especially considering AFT President Randy Weingarten had released his statement just after, around about February 5th, that talked about the reform address must talk about the recruiting abuses of the international labor market.
Correct.
Can you speak to that?
Well, I think Jaime talked about this need for a more comprehensive uniform mandate that will address all of those issues, right? So we have, we have these piecemeal measures to try to make whole people here who simply want to be productive, who want to live the American dream. And although Inspire it's a really good initiative, again, if you're a potential employee of one of those companies, are you really going to want to work when you know that you're subject to those types of abuses that you've heard about and that exist? It's not clear that you might want to take advantage of that. And so if it's the case that we really want to empower citizens to be more productive, to have security in their lives, then there has to be a more comprehensive measure put forth. And it has to be some type of discussion that's happening in the public sector as well as in the private sector, because the piecemeal measures themselves just really don't work. They really don't affect the sort of change that these citizens need to see.
All right, well then, you know me, I'm always saying I don't like describing the water while drowning. So let's come up for air. If we could advise or create a comprehensive immigration reform act, what will it look like? Jaime, give me one aspect, and I'm coming. Agber's ready. Okay, Agber, what's one thing that it should do?
Okay.
Especially when it comes to our students.
I think immigration laws are very complex. And Rashid made a point earlier that they have evolved over time, and I want to return to that point to answer your question, if I may. In the past, you had a situation where foreign students were required by 1st of January of each year to report their address. If they did not report their address, they were in violation of federal laws and were illegal.
So you're saying that's one thing that needs to be changed?
No, I'm just trying to tell you how it evolved. And then in 1986, there were 3 million undocumented aliens in this country when Reagan gave the amnesty that we like to talk very much about. So in those days, if you were illegal, you got a green card. If you were legal, you were left to your own devices. That was the law under Reagan.
Okay, so but if Quinn and them were sitting at the table right now, what will we tell them that they need, what teeth needs to be in there to give our undocumented students some sustainability?
Well,
I would just say, first and foremost, I mean, I want to see immigration comprehensive reform, so obviously it needs to get passed. And the only way that that's going to get passed, without discussing all the different nuances in terms of enforcement, citizenship status, but the citizenship status is fundamental. And I think that hopefully this bipartisan comprehensive reform that's going to come has to have that as a core piece. At the same time, though, you got to have the enforcement piece in there as well, right? So, for example, being able to at least, with respect to employment, have the E-Verify system, right? Because that at least will take care of those folks who are concerned, particularly on the Republican end, because you're still going to need those votes. It's the only way you're going to be able to get that passed. So you got to have a combination of both.
I mean, there are some component to this,
without getting into the nuances of E-Verify, but at the end of the day, if you don't have that, I just don't see any comprehensive.
Wait, Carolyn.
Okay.
Give us a teeth.
We need to keep families together. And any kind of comprehensive immigration reform should focus not only on the needs of the workforce and companies, but also keeping families together, because if you are here and you have been told that you are not going to see your son or daughter who for 15 years.
How can you study?
How can you study?
Oh, how can you live?
You can understand why the laws are bad laws and broken laws and why people don't follow them.
Rashid, teeth.
Yeah, I would say if you've demonstrated the ability to garner or create productive outcomes in terms of your citizenship status, no matter where it's at for America, then I think you should be given the ability, if you're a student, for instance, to have access to the pool of funds that are available to students so that you can have some security and have the ability to reach your highest heights of productivity as a student. You shouldn't be hampered, as so many of our students are, with these other issues that will curtail your ability to achieve the highest grades and the highest life opportunities possible. So I think federal resources need to be made available to students who are demonstrating that they are in fact making progress.
You ask what Queen can do. As a practical matter, he can't do anything.
No, he can't, but I'm saying is that if we're sitting at the table and we're creating something with teeth, I need your teeth because I only got 2 minutes.
He can't do anything because immigration laws as a matter of delegated powers.
I stand corrected.
He can give them driver's license.
Right.
And that will ease their daily hassles that they face in trying to get to their daily activities.
Okay.
And he has done that already.
He has done that. But what else?
I don't think of anything, because anything he is likely to do is likely to contravene federal laws, and he cannot implement it.
All right. What I think is that at the end of the day, and you know me, I'm getting philosophical, is I think there needs to be people at the table who love all the people that they serve. Because I think that if this was their mother or if this was their kid, the legislation and the whole initiative would have a totally different feel. That's what I think. That's honestly what I think. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to the after discussion because I want to talk about the whole vote complex.
Oh boy.
That's our show for today, but you can go to WYCC.org right now to be part of our continuing conversation, and see you next time on The Professors.